Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Needy No More, the podcast dedicated to healing the anxious attachment style. I'm your host, anxious attachment style coach and author, Chris Ratcliffe. I've helped thousands of people across 6 continents to end the cycle of anxious attachment through my books, workshops, digital downloads, and coaching program. I'm excited to carry on that mission here, sharing tools and techniques, principles, and practices for you to explore on your journey to growing more secure. Welcome back, everyone. I am super excited about today's episode because we are wrapping up our discussion of the cycle of anxious attachment. Today, we'll be talking about the final 2 steps in the process, which are addiction and stress. There are some questions I'm going to answer in today's episode. So to give you a little preview, here's what we're going to be covering. What is stress and how does it relate to addiction? What is love addiction? How does stress factor into the experience of anxious attachment? How does stress relate to safety, and why is that important? What is cortisol, and what are some ways you can reduce your cortisol levels and lower stress? How does cortisol relate to adrenaline? And last but certainly not least, how can you interrupt the cycle of addiction? The very first thing I'm going to do today is to read a chapter from Needy No More, which is called Addicted to Love and Stress. It was the best first date I've ever had. Clanking our wine glasses and resting them on the edge of his roof, I too felt like I was on the precipice of something truly risky, truly special, truly sacred. He picked me up and softly pushed my back against the wall of a nearby vestibule, his heart pounding and pulsating against mine. His eyes crinkled up with joy, the twilight catching their glacier blue hue in the dying light. Our giddiness escaped as laughter, inescapable bear hugs, and sweet, sumptuous kisses, a much-needed release of the escalating energy between us. Back in his loft a few moments later, the dulcet tones of Mariah Carey danced to the beat of his cocktail shaker. After several beverages and multiple make-out sessions, we fell asleep on the couch, his arms wrapped tightly around me and his head nuzzled in my neck. It was simple. It was pure. It was blissful. I floated home the next morning, aflutter with infatuation, excitement, and limerence. I was smitten, in the throes of a consuming crush, unable to detain my desires and let the proverbial chips fall as they may. We began texting incessantly, planning 2 more dates that week alone. I was taken by the belief of what we could become. I thought about how proud I'd be to be his boyfriend, how easy it was to be around him, how kinetic and concrete our connection seemed to be. Until it wasn't. After our 3rd date, the texts began to dwindle and the plans soon did too. Sensing his distance, both physically and emotionally, I made plea after plea for him to share what he felt. After all, what could have possibly changed in such a short period of time? But each bid was met with more distance, more confusion, until there was only silence and pain. Deep, simmering pain, the kind that keeps you awake at night, tears shaking out from the depths of your diaphragm. The kind of loss that takes you months from which to recover. The kind of intensity that creates a form of emotional withdrawal, even after just a few dates. Think about all the times you've craved the attention, affection, and validation of someone on whom you were crushing, in whom you were interested, or with whom you were in a relationship. Recall your fixation on their behavior, the hypervigilance and emotional monitoring in which you engaged. Sit with the uncomfortable reality of the protest behavior to which you resorted to try to get your needs met. Remember the intense checking of their social media, how you'd reread every message to decipher if their feelings had changed. Realize what the separation anxiety and withdrawal you experienced after spending a lot of time with them was trying to tell you. Ultimately, there are reasons why we engage in these pathways of thinking and behaving, and that is because they are textbook indicators of addiction. In fact, in her book, Facing Love Addiction, author Pia Mellody defines anxious attachment as the experience of love addiction, identifying the love addict as someone who is dependent on, enmeshed with, and compulsively focused on taking care of another person. But it's also so much more. To me, love addiction is an all-consuming experience defined by obsessive thinking about a partner and compulsive behaviors to create more intensity and closeness with them, in the hopes of not being left, cheated on, or abandoned. Marked by extremely high highs and extremely low lows. Love addiction mirrors other addictive cycles in not only their intensity, but also their instability. Much of that intensity and instability also mirrors the environments in which we were raised and relationships in which we've participated. I know this is true for me. Ever since I can remember, I've been a little bit boy crazy. Like many anxious attachers, I've always longed for someone to show up and choose me, to save me from my trauma and whisk me off into the sunset, to be a knight in shining armor and rescue me. It wasn't until I began my healing journey that I realized these desires were a projection of my own ability to save and heal myself and grow more secure, an abdication of my uniquely personal responsibility to confront my shadow, the dark night of the soul that only I could undergo. But this river ran deep for me. By the time I grew serious about my healing in my mid to late 20s, many of these cycles and patterns had been on repeat for 2 decades. I had my first crush when I was 10 years old. His name was Mr. Hill, and he was a college-aged teaching assistant to my 5th grade teacher. I was smitten. I remember his broad shoulders, his short brown hair, and his adorable smile. The way he flowed freely through the room with an empathetic air of confidence and authority. He was statuesque and sweet, like a Greek god that had swooped down into my class, gracing us with his heavenly, gentle presence. I couldn't take my eyes off of him. Even then, before I had words to describe this phenomenon, I was infatuated with a strong, masculine, handsome man. I wanted to feel protected. I wanted to feel cared for. I wanted to feel safe. Mr. Hill was the physical representation of that, the symbol of an ideal that shaped my dating experiences in the years to come. There were countless Mr. Hills in my teens and 20s. There was a heterosexual jock in my Spanish class in high school for whom I used to make mixed CDs, acceptable expressions of affection and forms of flirtation. There was a guy I dated in my early 20s who lived in the East Village in New York City for whom I fell head over heels after just 2 dates, only to become far too eager too soon and push him away, all the way back to his ex. There was a man I met in a gay club in Chelsea around the same time. I slept over at his place for nearly a week straight after meeting him. You can imagine the whiplash I experienced when he told me it was too much too soon. Truth is, I could give innumerable examples of how I've let my heart run away, of how I got swept up in the chemistry and connection of it all. But the most important takeaway from all those experiences is that they did not last. It's an intrinsic part of human nature to crave connection. In fact, we're neurologically hardwired for it. When we find it, especially romantically, it can feel magical and meant to be, like the stars finally aligned or heaven opened its gates. This process is largely chemical. A flood of hormones and neurotransmitters is released when we are in a state of lust, obsession, or limerence. And it is often because of this intoxicating cocktail of chemicals that we feel that sense of alignment, destiny, and divinity. We're quite literally high on the experience. Falling in love is the most addictive experience of all, one that can make us lose our mind and our way, causing us to behave in ways that aren't aligned with our values and don't fit with our character. The idea of a person, what they represent to us, the role they can play in the narrative we've prefabricated, can be and often is the most intoxicating and addictive aspect of all. Alas, our cultural conditioning around love, marriage, and romance is extensive. We don't have to search far and wide to see the evidence of this truth. From an early age, we are fed a steady diet of rampant romanticism through the music we listen to, the television shows we watch, and the movies we consume. Our culture is obsessed with love, and there are entire industries that capitalize on this obsession. Sex might sell, but love is addicting. As we've discussed, at its core, addiction is nothing more than the inability to tolerate reality. Unable to cope with the external stimuli or cause, as well as the internal emotional response or effect, we learn to circumvent the typical pathways for processing and healing. We dissociate, we ruminate, we externalize, we obsess, but we always do it for the same reason: in order not to feel. If we push deeper, we can often find a disturbing truth underlying these compulsive behaviors. There's a discomfort of being on our own. There's a fear of our inadequacy. There's the cumulative weight of our unresolved trauma. We become unconsciously addicted to these thoughts and beliefs and what they mean for us, the victimization they represent and powerlessness they perpetuate. The darkness becomes our default, and so does our need to be saved from it. While there are many different objects to which we can become addicted, there are only two pathways to becoming addicted in the first place: through stressful situations or the relief thereof. There's the rush of cortisol and adrenaline when we perceive something negative or stressful happening in the environment around us. And there's the rush of dopamine and serotonin and oxytocin when we perceive something positive or relieving happening as well. Stress and relief, threat and savior, hunger and satiation. Often, addiction is defined by the cycling between these extremes, these polarities. We can't help but get hooked on the high we get when we receive another hit of these brain chemicals. When certain thoughts, beliefs, and fears are engaged, we feel that rush once more. For the body, these stressful feelings are the baseline we've come to expect through the unstable and inconsistent experiences of our past. They feel familiar. They're home, but these cycles are also painful and damaging because they defy reality. Our inability to see or accept reality as it is does nothing to change reality itself. It only changes us. Like trying to swim upstream against the current, our resistance exhausts us until we get swept away in the process. There's a reason why so many folks who've experienced trauma also develop addictions to substances, sex, and even other people. They don't feel safe in the present moment, in their body, or both. Never is this more self-evident than it is for those with an anxious attachment style. As anxious attachers, we love love. We crave it, we obsess over it, we fiend for it. It's something we deeply desire because it seems to have eluded us. Hence why we romanticize rom-coms and binge-watch The Bachelor. Why we spend countless hours on dating apps and pining over romantic prospects. It is our drug, our fix, our high. Romanticism offers us an escape from our isolation and inadequacy. Or so it seems. What we don't realize, though, is that every hit, every piece of media we consume or swipe we make on a dating app only further reinforces our sense of lack and our mindset of scarcity. It is fuel for our shame. It drives the stakes deeper into our hearts, causing us to double down on the narrative that it can't and won't happen for us because rarely, if ever, has it actually occurred. This is a self-reinforcing illusion and a self-fulfilling prophecy. The over-romanticism of love and marriage makes us seek out media and experiences that encourage the over-idealization of a partner, the intensity of an early relationship, and the idea of love at first sight. It gives us data to believe that everyone around us is falling in love, except for us. And it emboldens our search for enmeshment as a form of escapism from our cage of loneliness. It also causes us to abandon ourselves. In fact, one of the very first signs that you might be slipping into a state of codependency is that you refrain from making plans of your own. Holding back from booking a workout class, catching up with friends, or doing what brings you joy is a recipe for disaster. This is the loudest warning that you might be repeating old patterns and falling into codependency and anxious attachment. Remember this: someone has to earn the right to rearrange your schedule. Doing so before that's been earned will create an imbalance of energy. The kind of partner you need will understand if you have things going on and will admire and respect you even more for it. In order to heal addiction, you need to sober up to the circumstances in front of you, to embrace reality instead of resisting it. As anxious attachers, this means we need to stop wishing away our singledom, to stop feeding the illusion that a romantic partner can be a savior. They aren't. The person with whom you'll eventually partner is only human. Just like you, they'll be wounded and imperfect and flawed. They will eventually disappoint you and can't be expected to carry the weight of all your disappointments from the past. While they can support you and hold space for you, they also can't be expected to take away your feelings of loneliness and inadequacy. Nothing can do that. If you throw yourself into a relationship thinking it will solve all of your problems, you're in for a rude awakening. Relationships only mirror back to us the healing work that still remains. Your time spent being single is a gift. It might not feel like it at the time, but having the ability to explore yourself, to deepen your self-awareness, and to advance in your healing are incredibly valuable experiences. And they set you up for success when you do find that person you'd like to commit to. That's not something to look down on. That's not something to wish away. That's not something to avoid. Being single helps to prepare you to be a healthy partner, at least when it's treated as such. I see that now, and I hope you do too. Okay. So, while that chapter helps to answer some of our initial questions here, including what is stress and how does it relate to addiction, and what is love addiction, in terms of how anxious attachment factors in here and how stress is related to it, remember the cycle of the experience of anxious attachment. We've already explored the steps of trauma, abandonment, and codependency, and also of nervous system dysregulation. Stress aversion and addiction factor in here as the final two steps in the process. You can't heal anxious attachment unless you heal your relationship with your body and therefore how it manages stress. And also heal any addictive patterns you might have, including how you might be over-romanticizing or over-idealizing romantic partners and romantic relationships generally. Let's talk about how stress relates to safety and why that is important. That might be one of the most important questions for today. Here's the thing. Feeling safe and feeling stressed are intertwined. The safer you feel, the less stressed you'll be. The less safe you feel, the more stressed you'll be. When we feel seen, heard, and understood, and supported, our body can relax. We aren't in a state of survival as often or as long. This is why the isolation and loneliness of modern times is so concerning. It increases stress levels and depletes our energy, and it keeps us from the sense of safety and support we need to get out of the cycle. Building and maintaining a support system is critical for health and well-being, and also for healing anxious attachment. We've already talked about emotional diversification and the role that that plays. But too often I hear people say that they're in their healing era when they're really just removing themselves from environments that trigger them and thereby isolating themselves. While solitude and space are important for emotional processing, a sense of safety is paramount, and that necessitates the presence of others. Isolation doesn't heal. Connection and safety do. Also, when we feel unsafe, it increases our stress, but when you are unable to sit with the stress in your body, typically you'll reach for something that is addictive, whether it's gambling or gaming, porn or the internet, food or drinks. You name it, people are going to reach for it in order not to feel the discomfort. So, the safer you feel with yourself and in your body, the more likely it is that you won't engage in addictive behaviors and patterns. And also, the more likely it is that you won't lean on a romantic partner thinking that they're some sort of savior, because they are not. The next thing I want to talk about is cortisol and some ways to reduce our cortisol levels and lower stress. Cortisol is a stress hormone that's produced by the adrenal glands in the body. In order to improve our relationship with stress, there are some things that we can do to lower cortisol, because the higher the level of cortisol, the more stressed you're going to feel. There are 4 B's and 4 S's that I'm going to review. The B's are balanced diet, so fruits, veggies, leafy greens, fermented foods, body movement, walking, running, weightlifting. You got to get those endorphins pumping, and you got to get your body moving. We're not meant to stay sedentary. Breath work is the 3rd B. The box breathing method and the physiological sigh are 2 expressions of this, but there's so many different ways to practice breath work. A simple Google search will show you, and maybe I'll dedicate a future episode to that. Your breath is way more closely connected to your mental health than you might realize. The 4th and final B is to build presence. Meditation and mindfulness obviously help with this, whether it's body scanning or following the breath. It can help with improving your cortisol levels because it brings you out of the present moment. So the more present you are, the more you can breathe freely and the lower your cortisol and stress. There's also 4 S's. Sleep. If you don't get enough sleep or the quality of your sleep is poor, it's going to have downstream effects elsewhere. You're going to reach for unhealthy foods, you're going to be more stressed and irritable, etc. 2nd S is sunlight. Go out into nature, get some fresh air, and boost your serotonin, dopamine, and vitamin D levels. Get your body moving again, and preferably out into some green space. 3rd S is supplements. While I am not a nutritionist or a licensed medical professional and am in no way telling you what to take or not to take, many of us are deficient in vitamins and minerals, in nutrients such as iron, vitamin D, magnesium, and more. Augment where you need to, and again, consult a professional for this. Also, ashwagandha can help with reducing stress, as can reducing alcohol and caffeine intake. Both of those can spike cortisol and stress levels. 4th S and final of the 8 ways that you can lower your cortisol levels is social connection. I'll say it once and I'll say it again. There's nothing quite as fulfilling as connecting with safe, solid, stable people in your life. We are a social species, and laughter is healing. Be with people who get you and connect with them. That can help to lower your cortisol levels significantly. How does cortisol relate to adrenaline, though? Cortisol is released in response to prolonged or chronic stress, whereas adrenaline is released in response to immediate or acute stress. Both keep us in a survival state and deplete us, but cortisol tends to have longer-term effects. That leads us to the final question for today's episode. How can you interrupt the cycle of addiction? I addressed this a little bit in the chapter from the book that I read today, but here's what I'll say. Remember that addiction is about the things we turn to when we can't tolerate reality. So the most essential thing you can do is learn to sober up to the circumstances in front of you. Here's how you can do that. Refrain from avoiding, denying, or otherwise numbing your feelings. Learn to sit with yourself without doing anything. Without trying to push your feelings away or avoid the experience. Breathe into and through the discomfort. Call up a friend or a family member. Lean on your support system. Reach out to a therapist, a coach, or other mental health professional who can assist you. There's no shame in getting support where you need it. Take it one day at a time, though. You have to be willing to feel your feelings, whatever they are, because addiction is driven by your desire to disengage. That means learning to be with feelings that are really uncomfortable, like rejection, abandonment, inadequacy, or shame, loneliness, disappointment, frustration, and many, many more. And learning to share them with others too, because again, we're a social species. But at the end of the day, sobering up to the reality in front of you and the experience inside of you. This completes our analysis of the cycle of anxious attachment. I will continue unpacking ways that we can interrupt this cycle in future episodes and in perpetuity in every aspect of the work that I do. Whether it's downloadable materials or any future books I might write or workshops I do or lives on TikTok or TikTok videos or posts on Instagram. But for now, it's important that we finalize that evaluation of the cycle because those are the experiences that drive anxious attachment. Trauma, codependency and abandonment, nervous system dysregulation, stress aversion, and addiction. I hope that this analysis in these episodes so far has been helpful for you. And if so, please rate and review the podcast and maybe leave a comment on Spotify. I love hearing from you all. So if you want to email me too, you can always do so at me@crackliff.com. Thank you so much, as always, for watching and listening. And I can't wait to share next week's episode with you. I have my second podcast interview, this time with a really, really special guest, and I can't wait for you to hear it.